What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Just finished my latest rankings update, and it's been 2 weeks since we've made this video. So here we are. I'll be going over the players who have risen the most in my latest update, and we'll be talking about why I moved them up. If you want to see the full rankings, all the sleepers, busts, targets, etc., you can view that at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. So let's start things off with the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat: among tight ends last season, who led the league in percent of team air yards? The answer was Mark Andrews, and IKA8 was the first to get that one right. Today's stat: among wide receivers with at least 100 targets, who had the lowest ADOT? And for those of you who don't know, ADOT is average depth of target, so how far downfield their targets were on average. All right, so who is going up the most in my rankings? One thing I want to say is that the cutoff for the list you see on the screen is 8 spots. So if someone goes up 7 spots overall, they didn't make the list. Because of that, as you can also see, there are much fewer early round picks because, you know, it's difficult for like a second round pick to move up 8 spots, right? That something crazy must have happened for that to occur. So what I'm going to do to start off is talk about the few players in the early rounds that I did move up, because I don't want to just skip over them entirely. We'll do them briefly. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire moved up 3 spots because I am gaining confidence in his floor given how good he is as a receiver and obviously how good that offense is. I moved George Kittle up 5 spots because obviously the Deebo Samuel injury is going to just secure his target share, but it's also going to give him games where he just erupts, so I had to move him up. Todd Gurley moves up 4 spots because I've just been thinking the touches are just going to be insane as long as he can stay healthy, and I feel like his current ADP is just assuming that he gets hurt, and we shouldn't really do that because it's not like he's missed very many games in his career. So yes, elevated injury risk, but it's not guaranteed he's going to get injured. So I think we're a little bit too low on him as a community. I moved both Adam Thielen and Robert Woods up 7 spots because I love how safe they are, and I don't think you're sacrificing upside when you take them, which you guys saw in yesterday's video. So that brings us to the list you see on the screen, and we'll start things off with Le'Veon Bell moving up 11 spots. I think this is similar to Todd Gurley. Like, I've just been too critical of Bell. We know the offense is going to be bad. That's not something I'm trying to debate. But we also know he's the guy, and the receptions are going to be there. He was so unlucky with touchdowns last year. 4 touchdowns on over 300 touches? I think it was like 311 touches. So if we think he's going to be around 300 again, he's going to have a few more touchdowns this season, and the reception floor is really high. So I think we might be a little bit too low on him as well, and so I had to move him up. The next grouping of players is just this chunk of wide receivers, and that's Marquise Brown, Tyler Boyd, Will Fuller, Darius Slayton, and Brandon Cooks. All of them see a good rise. And what I basically did was I moved that chunk ahead of Edelman, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, and Deontay Johnson, then a few tight ends, and then a group of quarterback that I had just a little bit too high because, again, we're not really targeting quarterbacks that early in drafts. And I actually feel really good about these players. I went over Brown in depth in the Dynasty video, I believe, on Sunday. But you guys know I love him. Boyd, I'm starting to warm up to a little bit. I know I kind of talked about how much I didn't love him earlier this season. I'm backing off that a little bit. No one's going to kick him out of the slot, so his snaps should still be there. They're going to go down on the outside because there will be times where they want to use Green and Higgins as the 2 receivers, but Boyd's still going to play a ton. I think this offense has sneaky upside, and so I think I was a little bit too low on him. So I moved him up. Fuller and Cooks, both exceptional deep threats, obviously both on a very high-end offense, and have, of course, one of the best quarterbacks in the league who's not afraid to chuck it deep. So while I don't think both of them are going to explode this season, I think it's probably going to be one or the other. I think they could both be values, and I think they're both guys we should go after because think about it. we're in this range, we're looking for this sort of upside. How many people have more upside in the range that we're talking about right now than like Will Fuller? I mean, if Will Fuller plays 16 weeks, he could erupt. And if Will Fuller doesn't play 16 weeks, well, it probably means Brandon Cooks is going to erupt. So I think both those guys are good to go after for their upside. And then Darius Slayton is just set up to play basically all of the snaps as the primary deep threat on the offense and the number one receiver on an ascending offense. So I think we're much too low on him. I'm still was ahead of ADP, was ahead of ECR, but it's just more now basically. So I feel really confident about all of those receivers. So I moved them up a little bit. Also moved Wilson and Josh Allen up about 15 spots. And I wouldn't look too much into that. I didn't change their quarterback ranking at all. So they're the exact same ranking they were before for the quarterback position. They were just a little bit too far down in the overall rankings. I do have Josh Allen as a target since he was already the quarterback 6 last season, and now he gets Stephon Diggs, one of the better receivers in the league. So he is extremely safe and has a ton of upside. So if you're in that range and you really want to go quarterback, he's a guy I'd go after. But you guys also know I do prefer waiting on quarterback. So unless he falls, I'm probably not going to take him. But it could absolutely happen. You could be in a league where Josh Allen, people are like, don't really love the pick. And he does fall a few rounds, and then he would become a great value. Also moved up this duo in tight ends of Evan Ingram and Tyler Higbee. I do not have either of them as targets right now, mostly because there are so many great tight ends late that the only person I'm really targeting early is Mark Andrews. And even then, I want a value. I'd rather wait until the end of the draft because there's so many. But if you're someone who really likes mid-round tight ends or one of these two falls, then I am starting to look at these two as my preferred options in the middle rounds. I alluded to it earlier, but the Giants may actually be solid on offense this season, and Evan Ingram has been fantastic when he's been healthy. The health is the main issue, but we assume more risk in the middle rounds, and so it's not a bad pick since he does have top 5 upside. And then with Higbee, I've moved him up to the tight end 7 ahead of Gronk, Jared Cook, Hunter Henry, and Hooper. This doesn't mean that I'm just 100% sold that they're going to use him like they did last season. If I was, he'd probably be in the top 3 because that's how good he was. But he just has so much more upside than the 4 players that I moved him ahead of because he had one of the best stretches we've ever seen. And so we know he's capable of posting those type of numbers. And I know Everett was injured for those weeks, and that's kind of why it happened. But we can't just ignore that it happened. We have to look at that and say, this is a possibility. And so I think that where I had him as like the tight end 11 was just too low. So move him up to 7. I feel much better about that. Edelman does see a bump up 8 spots, but I am still not drafting him. I just had him a little bit too low. This is going to be a very low volume passing offense, and it's not like he's going to be a red zone threat either. So there's a definite possibility he's closer to like 900 yards and 4 touchdowns. And at that point, maybe he's a value where he's going as far as the end of season numbers, but points per game and what you're actually getting, it's just very unlikely you'll be able to rely on him. Maybe in a full PPR league you can do it, but realistically, he's going to be going earlier in a full PPR league, so the value is just taken away. So I'm not targeting him, even though I moved him up, but I did move him up because I think I was a little bit too low. Next, we have the trio of Anthony Miller, Jamison Crowder, and John Brown, all going up about 13 spots, and they all moved ahead of a chunk of running backs and then a few quarterbacks. I do have Miller and Crowder listed as targets since I have them both a good amount above ADP and ECR. I'm not as sold on Crowder as I am with Miller, but I do think Darnold is going to take a step forward this season. We need to remember that he just turned 23. I mean, he's younger than Joe Burrow. So it's not shocking that he's struggled so far. He's been very young. Like, he was raw coming into the league. So even with Darnold struggling last season, having a pretty poor season overall, Crowder commanded the 16th most targets among wide receivers, which isn't some incredible feat because He does have a really low ADOT. It would be much different if he was like a deep threat, but it's still solid. And I think the addition of Mims on the outside should help them sustain more drives, and then maybe Perriman can also help on the outside, but I think Mims is more the future of that team. But I think having a little bit more help on the perimeter is going to help them move the ball down the field more consistently. It's going to help them gain more yardage, and that's just good for everyone's upside. So I do like Crowder. But I think Miller has a little bit more upside. He's the clear number 2 receiver. The offense has nowhere to go but up. He was fantastic down the stretch last season, and that's when he was finally healthy and finally getting the snaps. And we should assume both those things will continue into this season. So I know the fantasy community has just been waiting for Miller to break out, but I do think in his 3rd year this season, it's going to happen. The last player in this trio is John Brown, and I just think I moved him too far back after the Diggs trade. Sure, it hurts a lot and it really caps his upside, but I think if we look at the players around him and behind him in my rankings, it's like Kirk, Marvin Jones, Mike Williams. I mean, there are no number 1s left, right? Like, even though we say, oh, he's a number 2 now, it's like, well, everyone in this range is a number 2, right? Like, we're in the 40s roughly. So Brown does have still a nice weekly ceiling. Obviously, his overall upside has been capped if Diggs stays healthy, but that doesn't mean week to week he can't have really nice games, because we know Josh Allen just has a cannon of an arm. We know he's not afraid to chuck it deep. So I like my new ranking on him, but I do not have him as a target since Diggs is there. So there's going to be a lot of variance to his game. And like I said, the total numbers at the end of the season are a little bit capped. Next up is Carson Wentz, and I actually moved him up to the quarterback 9, right behind Matt Ryan. I originally had Breeze, Brady, and Stafford ahead of him, but I think that's a mistake. He's shown an elite ceiling when his weapons are healthy and when he's healthy. And if he's going to have Rager, Deshaun Jackson, Ertz, Goddard, and Sanders all healthy, then that's enough weapons for him to be a quarterback 1. And that's also going to come with a nice weekly ceiling, given that they have some explosive weapons in that crew. So I think I was too low on him, moved him up to quarterback 9. And speaking of that offense, I moved Rager up as well, and he was already one of my favorite late round wide receiver picks, so I love him even more. But I've just been thinking, like, where is the competition? I know he's a rookie, and it's tough for rookies this season, but who is he competing with? Deshaun Jackson? I mean, he's a deep threat, so yeah, he'll take some deep balls away, but Deshaun is not a target hog. And Alshon doesn't even have a timetable for returning, so I don't see him as a threat. So Rager should pretty easily be the top targeted wide receiver on a pretty good offense. So why is he going so late? Like I just said, there's really no wide receiver 1s, or I guess top wide receivers on offenses left in this range. Well, besides Rager, I mean, right? Like, people are going to skip over him because they hate that this season for rookies they don't have the time. But also, you guys know you're going to be in leagues where no one even knows who he is. So he's a target, absolutely, because I don't think people realize how many footballs are going to be thrown his way. The only other player that's rise really means anything is Marlon Mack. And this one corresponds to a slight drop in Jonathan Taylor's ADP. Vegas really seems to think that the split's going to be closer to 50-50. You guys know I'll personally be shocked if the split is not 60-40 in favor, or at least 60-40 in favor of Taylor, with Taylor getting a lot more targets. But we need to consider that Mack is still going to be used, so he has value. And he does have a ton of upside if Taylor went down, because we know the offensive line's great. We know Rivers loves targeting running backs. So if Taylor got hurt, Mack's going to be really good. So you've got that upside, and it does seem like he's still going to be used in the offense, so he has a floor as well. I don't think I'm targeting Mack still. I talked about him in a video last week. There are other running backs in this range I do prefer, but he's not a bad pick because we're looking for upside in that range, and he's got it. So those are the players who have risen the most in my rankings over the last 2 weeks. Again, if you want to see the full rankings, all the targets, busts, sleepers, all that jazz, You can check that out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That's the end of this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? Thanks for watching.